The power is literally in your hands. Unlike any time in my career, one state can chart the course, not just for the next 4 years, but for the next generation.
What is at stake here in Georgia?
Simply put, everything. This is the future of the United States that is taking place in one portion of the country. These are two elections that are truly going to define the presidency of Joe Biden and what legislation his administration will be able to pass.
So maybe we start with Georgia first. What do these elections mean for this state?
Yeah, so since 2002, Georgia has been a Republican stronghold. Republicans have succeeded in most every election, and since 2018, we've seen a change. And so for Georgia to be a place that is at the epicenter of political change in the United States, it's unheard of. And I think that that's what makes this election sort of extraordinarily unheard of. I think if it was in a state like Michigan or Pennsylvania, it would be different. But especially since it's Georgia, I think it makes it all the more unique.
So what made the big difference in the last election, which kind of started this whole change or made this whole change visible? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Donald Trump. Georgia, Atlanta is a growing city in the United States. It is, it's been called the Hollywood of the South. It's the new business empire in the country. And more people are moving to the suburbs. And we have seen, especially in 2018, as well as in this election, that suburban women have been the true change. And people for example, the suburbs are highly educated, unlike the rest of the state. It's a wealthier portion. And I think that that's why Georgia is so unique, that there is, 50% of the state lives in the metro area, and then 50% lives in rural communities.
So maybe you can explain to our audience a little bit the importance of Stacey Abrams and why she became so important and what she's doing obviously so well.
Yeah, regardless of what people think of Stacey Abrams politically, she is a genius. She has been able to go into communities, especially communities of color, as well as into communities like college campuses where young people are. She has encouraged voter turnout, and a lot of people look at her election in 2018 and they feel that she was wronged in that election. She was denied the chance of being governor. And I think that lit a fire in people, and it encouraged them to go out and make a difference in these elections, because, in Georgia, we have seen that, the smallest number of people can change an election entirely.
Yourself are a Republican, or used to be a Republican, but you are engaged in this group, GOP, the Grand Old Party for Joe. How did this come along?
Yeah, I have been in a Republican family for generations. My great-grandmother worked for Republican President Gerald Ford. Needless to say, being a Republican was a part of my DNA. And when Donald Trump came along, he claimed to be a Republican, and I saw, all of these things that he was doing that, just were not what the party stood for. His disdain for immigrants, women, people of color, and that's not what the party was about. So, and I don't identify as a Republican anymore. They left me a long time ago. And so, especially in this election, it was not just about Democrat or Republican. It was about the type of country we wanted to be, a country where people are welcome, or a country where people are turned away.
Tell us a little bit about that, what that all means for your former party, for the Republicans.
I think it's sad, and I think that a lot of Republicans who are in my shoes would agree with that. I don't know if the party will ever be what it was. I think that we have seen in the past 2 elections where more and more people who identify with Donald Trump have been elected. We have seen 106 members of Congress and 11 US senators who in the last few days have said that they are going to challenge these election results on the 6th. And they are denying 80 million Americans their voice. And this is an outgoing president. He lost by a resounding margin. He said in 2016 it was a landslide. So, he had a landslide defeat this go around. And, it has been, it's shameful, truly, in what has happened. And I think that for these Republicans to go against the will of the party and the country, I don't think that the party will ever go back to what it was, at least for the foreseeable future, because many of these Republicans are here to stay.
And what about the Republicans who kind of are the traditional politicians you joined or you wanted to kind of be part of when you were a member of the Republican Party? What will happen to those people?
I think that they are a dying breed. Moderate Republicans who have been elected are few and far between. I would say there are truly 3 in the Senate, those being Senators Murkowski, Collins, and Romney. I don't know if there are many states that today would elect a moderate Republican anymore. And, we've seen just in the last few days, a former cabinet secretary and U.S. senator who was a Republican call for a new party to be formed. And, I think that's more where we're headed than seeing the Republican Party go back to, the days of Lincoln and Eisenhower. So I think that that's more likely that a new party form than for a reformation in the GOP.
So do I understand you right? You see the possibility that kind of the Trump-style Republicans keep the old, the good old party, and like the rather moderate Republicans are forced to start a new party?
Yeah. I think that it's hard for a lot of people. Many of these Republicans, like the ones that I've mentioned, I think it's hard for them to totally jump ship and per se become a Democrat because, there is still ideological difference between, Mitt Romney and someone like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. There are disagreements. And so I think that a lot. So I think that where I'm going with this is there's a lot of everyday people who struggle with that same decision. And I do believe that if a strong center party were to come about, I think it could be successful, especially with more and more high profile Republicans sort of endorsing this idea.
And would you then consider to join this party?
Yeah, I what I've learned more in the last 2 elections for me personally is that it's become more about the person over the party and what's right for the country. In this past election, I voted for a few Republicans and I voted for several Democrats. I voted for Raphael, Warnock, and John Ossof. And I think that that's more of what we need. I hope that, regardless of whether a new party comes about or the 2 parties stay the way they are, I hope that all Americans, whether you're from the right or the left, can look more at person rather than just sticking with the status quo and what the party says.
So Carter, when you said in the beginning of our little chat here, everything is at stake regarding the whole United States. Talk a little bit about that. What did you mean by that?
You know, we have seen that in the last few years that Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, needs fixing. We are in the middle of this pandemic. We need economic relief. And, you know, we are seeing more and more calls around the country for them to pass a $2,000 stimulus relief for each American. And without a Senate that can provide for Joe Biden's policies, I think that his administration is going to have an incredibly difficult time, you know, trying to work with some of these Republicans who are there, who have been staunch supporters of Donald Trump and who in recent days have, you know, wanted to put a halt to everything, that they're more concerned about supporting the ego of the current man in the White House rather than supporting the lives of hundreds of millions of Americans.
And what does it mean for the two-party system, the outcome? Which impact will that have on the future of the Dems and the future of the Republicans?
I mean, I think that if the two Democrats are able to pull it off on Tuesday, I think that it shows that if, you know, again, like we talked about, Stacey Abrams' techniques, I think it proves that, you know, it works, that you don't have to pander to the center, that you can, you know, run on traditional Democrat values, that you can make the case and, you know, people agree. And I think that for the Republican Party, I think that it proves that everything is at stake in all of these states that they once thought were strongholds. I mean, you know, Arizona now for the first time in decades has 2 Democrat senators. You know, this is not just something that's happening in Georgia, but we're seeing it in other places as well. And, you know, if the 2 Republicans are able to win, I think that it is a true major blow to the Democrat Party. And I think that they are going to have to do some major evaluation. And I think that it's scary because it opens the door for a lot of Republicans to scream that the 2020 election was just a huge fraud in Georgia.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you think they will be kind of interpreted, or that it might be used for that argument again if the Republicans win the Senate race.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Joe Biden only won Georgia by like 13,000 votes. And so, you know, Donald Trump for the last days has, you know, screamed and basically called for Republicans not even to vote in Georgia because the whole election is a fraud. And, you know, he'll, you know, if the 2 Republicans win, he'll use that and say, look, I did win Georgia. And
does Donald Trump help the 2 Democratic candidates?
I think he does just as much good for both sides. I think that Donald Trump does something incredibly smart in that, you know, he holds, if you look, his rallies all occur in parts of rural Georgia. He turns out his voters in rural areas, which, as I mentioned before, account for half the population, you know, but I also think that, you know, Donald Trump, you know, encourages Democrats living in Atlanta and the surrounding areas to get out just as much. Georgia is unlike the rest of the country. I think that it's truly going to be a game of who can turn out who better.
So Carter, I have to ask this last question. What's your take? Who will win?
If I was going to play it safe, I would say that David Perdue, the Republican, will beat John Ossof. but I think that Raphael Warnock will beat Kelly Loeffler. And I think that there's a good chance that we're going to see a Democrat-Republican split victory.
And what would that mean?
I think that it sends a loud message. Kelly Loeffler has been a conspiracy theorist. She has posed with a congresswoman-elect who has spread racist, anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant remarks. And I think that it also proves that, there is a shred of decency that is still accepted in politics. And I think that it proves that the Republican Party, if they want to be successful, they have to condemn these people like Marjorie Greene, Kelly Loeffler, who continue to support just absurd theories.
Thank you very much. Stay well and talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Bye. Happy New Year.